Hey guys, welcome to another ride in the Struggle Bus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. Today we have our second, not another, Road to One Dan series games. And this is a pretty exciting game, but I want to go over a few things before we get into it. First and foremost, I'm sure that you guys all have the burning question of, Gabe, are you One Dan yet? No, I'm not. That's why I'm still here. But anyway, before I get into that game, I want to show you something that I thought was pretty exciting. So in our last video, one of my takeaways was going over the Aji at B6 here, right? This was Aji that I wasn't too familiar with. And so I went over this in the last video. And why I think this is interesting is just a few games later, we had a situation like this where I'm also black in this game. And I find it ironic that it's even the same corner. But in this situation, you know, if white is able to firm this area up, he gets a good amount of points there. But oh, look, we've got this Aji that we learned about last time. And in this situation, it's pretty devastating if white lets black fully cut off these three stones. Bad things happen. So white decided to just back off. We connected underneath, and the cut, you know, the threat of the cut is still there. And so he fixed it. So we got this in Aji. And I just thought or in Sente rather. And I just thought that that was pretty cool that this happened so quickly after my last video where we went over this exact situation. So hopefully that's a sign that, you know, this is actually worthwhile. So let's dive into our next game, which was another league game, and I'm really proud of this game. This is one of the stronger games I've played in recent history. Might just very well be the strongest game I've played. This was another Eagle league game, and this was against somebody who's 1 Dan on OGS. So probably 2 Dan on KGS. So, you know, significantly stronger than I am. And I was white this game. So let's take a look at how the game played. So we both took a 4-4 and a 3-4. He approached, and I did a high pincer, which I've been doing a lot recently just because I like the type of game that this makes. It makes it more dynamic. It makes it more interesting. He did the typical response. I did not go and do our push and cut, which a lot of people do. Typically, you're printer and closer if you want to do something like that. And we extend, and I jump, and then he tanukied. I approached the other corner. He backed off, and we did this variation, which seems fine. And then he tanukied and went for the 3-3. So at this point, you know, I decided to block on top and did the variation where I get sente. And then went and played here with the goal of pressuring these 4 stones. And in retrospect, you know, that's a mistake. This group is too strong to attack, right? And you look at this and go, well, you know, it does pressure a little bit. It also, you know, potentially grows our territory here, potential there, but it doesn't do either of those moves particularly well. If we're looking at getting territory, I probably should have just come back to somewhere over here. If I was looking to really pressure the group, then I could go and threaten the cut, which is something that I've been focusing a lot on in my games recently, is paying more attention to cuts. But either way, this is where I played, and then black played this follow-up move. And I was a little frustrated here because I actually recently studied this variation, but then played it in the wrong order. White's supposed to come back to F3 right here. But that's not the order I did it in. And the second I played this, I was like, I played it out of order. I'm like, I hope this doesn't just completely blow the game up. And there is this Atari, but it's tricky, and I don't think obviously black didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so then I came back, and he protected, and then I went up. And then we pushed each other up a little bit. And then he came back. And this move's a little slow. This is probably, I bet, a move that he regrets making. You know, giving me sente in this situation. And I decided to continue going after these stones. But again, they're pretty strong. So this was just a miss. And I then went and threatened this cut. And he's connected up. And while this shape is ugly, you know, he's already split me. He's out. He's fine. right? And then my second, big mistake here, it was playing this. And the intent of this one was to pressure this group over here, which is also strong, right? So we're pressuring a lot of strong groups, which doesn't make sense. I've already invested a bunch of stones on this side. I really need to block black from playing b12. So I should just take this diagonal, which is Gote, right? But it does a lot to protect this because, again, if black were to just jump in here immediately, this is a tough stone to contain, and it can start doing a lot of damage in here. So black decides to come out, and I go claim the corner. And this, again, this is consistent with the plan of this going after this group, right? So I followed up on what my intent was, and I went and got this corner, but it does so in Gote, but he does push, I push, and then he covers here. So actually I did end up getting Sente out of this. And then I decided that this being the next real large area that I wanted to reduce this. And he blocked here. And I know this reduction move. And the intent of it is you're threatening both A and B, right? If they block one, you can get the other. But in this situation, he blocked one, and I did not take R5, and I should have. I should have taken this. It gets messy, it gets complicated, but I have to start putting myself out there and doing moves like this. But instead, I just decided to keep him low, and then took this. I felt like this was good timing for just to get this move in there, and so I discussed on stream that. I had been looking at this for a while, and I was unsure if it was a worthwhile exchange to make, but I decided here that it was, and I do believe it turned out to be good. So here, another little mistake. I go and do this just for shape, right? I was like, well, I've got this cut, I can do this, and then and then I can cover, and we're fine. The issue is this move doesn't actually get us to where we want to be going, right? These stones were just meant to reduce. I should get in and get out. So instead of playing that, I should play something like p7 to give me multiple directions to run. He goes to threaten the cut. I connect, and then he goes to surround on the left. And so now I finally take p7. And so the question is, were these exchanges worth it for black getting those two stones? Not really. So black goes to block, I push, he pushes, and then I play this to threaten the cut. But this, after I reviewed this later, I learned of a better shape for this. And that shape is this. And this is called the elephant pinch, right? It leaves an elephant's eye. But what's nice about this is the only way for black to connect is by playing this really clunky move. Right, this is not a move that he wants to do. And what's nice about this turn is, it's a big turn on this board. Again, especially if I end up getting a stone in the C13 area after this, after we settle here. So this missed the mark a little bit because black can just push through, and when I push through, he can push through again. Fortunately for me, he did not push through. This is a pretty devastating move for him that he missed. He instead haned, and I immediately cut. And what's nice about the cut is it's Sente, right? Because we've got he's only got those two liberties there. So RJ4 stone, putting in some work. So it was a good exchange. And then same thing, while this is clunky, right? It's clunky shape. It forces him to connect up. And so we further use the Aji of J4. So he connects and we jump out. He threatens to cut, we block. He Ataris, we connect, and he connects here. So in game, I was looking at this move pretty hard, and I really wanted to play it. I think I have to go after those stones, right? I mean, I guess I wanted this fight, because remember, guys, we still have this cut here. And unfortunately, my current lack of fighting spirit got in the way, because I saw these stones over here as not yet alive. And in game, I believe I said that, if I play here, he's just going to jump out, and then I'm going to have to run with this group anyway, and he's already ahead of me. But this is such a strong move on this board, and it is for a real long time in this game, that we really just need to take it. And then when he does this, then we can jump out and stay ahead. Unfortunately, I decided, I got a little scared and jumped out on this side, but I do regret this move. He threatens to cut, I block. and then he gets to jump out. And I do another really bad move to connect up. Again, I'm trying to focus more on cuts. And so with that in mind, we have a very obvious, this isn't even a Hane, it's a turn, but the Hane at the head of 3 really activates this cut. So this is a much more proactive way to keep us connected, right? Black probably has to do something like this to fix his shape. And it's kind of sad, right? That's not a move that Black wants to do. So Q13, significantly better than Q11. And then the crux of the game is this move right here. And look, anybody watching this video wants me to play B12. I wanted to play B12. The issue was I couldn't see a realistic way of killing this stone. And if he lives in here, this is where all of my points are. And in game, I discussed that. And the issue was seeing something like this. Black gets a move here, gets this Atari, potentially gets this Atari, and now all of a sudden, there's a lot going on here, and how do we deal with this? And we just lost not all of our points on the board, but most of it, right? So this is what I was afraid of. And so going back to when he played C10, I decided, well, let's count and see where this game is. And so I took a minute and I counted. And I saw that if I played C8, backing off timidly, that the game was still very close. I had way up by like 1 or 2 points, which, from error of counting, basically just says this is still a very close game. As where if I play something, like B12 and mess it up, right, then the game just ends. And so I very reluctantly backed off and played C8. This is so timid. Being timid, guys. I apologize if this is just like a disgustingly gross move. And I know everybody who's watching probably groaned. You guys are probably groaning as well that I backed off. And many people thought that this is where I lost the game. I've had the game reviewed and was shown that this move here is fine. This move is fine. But once he backs off, I need to stop. I then kept on going to further gain my territory. But this move already secured the territory. And now I need to be looking at these 3 stones. But more importantly, let's go back. Let's go back to here and look at some of the options that we had, because on this board, there are a number of cuts that are available, right? Black is not actually fully connected here. So if instead of even going after that stone, if I pressure with a move like this, I can then start getting more strength to then go after this stone. And if he ignores that and starts doing stuff like this, then I can start turning on the cuts here. And as he fixes stuff like this. And now, this black group doesn't look too healthy. There's a lot of potential here. And because of that, Black probably can't ignore a move like J10. And he probably starts needing to be a little more proactive up top. So I need to be looking for stuff like that, because these are things that 1-Dan players can see, and even plenty of 1K players can see, but it's certainly a blind spot of mine. But either way, I did timidly pull back. Black slid back, and again, this was probably the larger of the mistakes between these two moves, because this let Black just fully surrounds my one stone here. Now all of a sudden, after he plays this, all of a sudden he just got like 20 points here, which was not part of my counting when I counted, right? So now all of a sudden I felt way behind and knew that I made a terrible mistake. And then so at this point, I figured the best I can do is, go for big end game and see what we can get. And that's pretty much, this game's pretty much already an end game. There is obviously there's a lot of stuff going on in the center here, and including another cut that I go to threaten later, which is M17. So we again, I'm just kind of playing the big end game moves here, and then he plays this, and he does this weird sequence, and this was this was a big mistake because this turns on the Aji at e2. So I don't know why he took that Atari. I understand why he took this Atari. And then threatened to push through, threatened to, did his peep, and I connected. So, he recognized that M17 was putting a lot of pressure on the cuts here in the groups. And so he found a good way to kind of proactively fix them. And I was pretty impressed with this. But because of G5, he now needs to come back and fix B3. And this is my next big mistake. I shouldn't answer this move, but in my mind I was still in the mindset of I'm playing my big endgame moves, right? And so I played this. Instead, I should have looked at this cut here because this is tough to answer. This move is tough to answer. I've taken a look at it through AI a bunch of times, and there are lots of variations, and they're all very tricky. But I know if I was black here, I likely messed this up. And my opponent probably does too, because the answers are difficult. I'm not going to go through them. But again, I'm actively looking at cuts when I'm playing, right? That's what I'm working on to try to get stronger. And I should have looked at this, especially since I played M17 with the intent of turning on some cuts here. And then I just never came back and did it because I was so focused on my endgame moves. And then he takes this, which pretty much solidifies black. So then we continue on endgame, and the rest of this pretty much is endgame. And he ends up getting me by, I believe, 7.5 points. Which, you want to know what? I'll take that. If this guy, if this game was on KGS where I play, I'm fairly certain that he'd be a strong 2-dan. And if you told me I was going to play against a strong 2-dan with me playing white and only losing by 7.5, I'm not too upset by that. There is one interesting little bit of endgame that got shown to me later, though. So let's go take a look at that. We'll skip through this stuff. It's when black plays here. So this is a big endgame move. So the question is, and the question's been for a long time, why hasn't anybody played S11 yet? Right? It's a big move. So the question is, do we play M18 or do we play S11? I talked about this during the game, and I did my counting and I decided that M18 is bigger, but there's an interesting little bit here, and that is if we take this Atari and then connect this, black no longer has any outside liberties, and there's a cut here, and there's cuts. Again, we're focusing on cuts. So if black, he wouldn't play this, but black plays a move that's somewhere else, all of a sudden we start getting interesting Aji, where we now threaten to kill these stones. And now we can get something like this. And this would obviously be quite bad for black, right? And so would it play out exactly this way? Maybe not. But there's a lot of Aji here because of those cuts. Enough that black probably, instead of following up his N18 threat, probably needs to connect. And then we would have gotten N18 anyway. I would have never seen this. But it's something that we can keep an eye out for next time. And then so going to the end of the game, this is what it looks like, and black ended up winning by 7.5. And when we went through this with through AI, the game was always within 7.5 points the entire game, and it fluctuated a little bit. There were times where I was ahead. There were times where he was ahead. Obviously, at the end of the game, he was ahead. But an exceptionally close game through and through, and I'm pretty happy with it. So, what are my big takeaways from this game? The two main takeaways are that I really do need to focus on cuts, but more so also like studying them and making sure that I actually understand what's going on with cuts, because looking out for them isn't good enough. I also need to make sure that I have an understanding of being able to identify cuts that are dangerous or ones that aren't. The other big takeaway is I need to focus more on not attacking strong groups, but also really thinking about strength in general of groups. Many players, many stronger players, when they play, territory is completely secondary to strength, right? They are going to try to keep their group strong, try to keep their opponent's groups weak, and then from that, they will end up getting more points by virtue of strength, not the other way around. So this is a situation where I need to recognize that his groups are strong and I can't really go after them. And then later in the game, when black played here, I don't have to worry as much about this territory versus just looking at the strength on this board and seeing that black has a lot of weaknesses. And if I find good ways to go after those weaknesses, I'll get more than the points that I lose here. And that's an advanced concept for me, but I at least understand the theory of it. So going forward, I'm going to be trying to pay more attention to strength of groups, and I'm going to continue looking at cuts. And maybe for my next league game, I can actually show you guys a win for once, but we will see. So thank you for joining me on this journey of not another road to one Dan, and I'll see you guys next time.